The following half-hour show is a paid political program and is not endorsed by this station, management, or staff.
The following program is sponsored by Excalibur Insurance Management Services.
We welcome to this week's show a majority House Appropriations Chairman and our very own United States Congressman, Matt Cartwright. After this interview, ironically, Matt will be leaving us to escort the President of the United States, Joe Biden, for his visit to northeastern Pennsylvania to promote his infrastructure bill, which is currently languishing in Congress. Ironically, that bill is being held hostage by Matt's own Democratic caucus, the self-styled Progressive Caucus, which is holding up that bill and tying it to the very controversial $3.5 trillion reconciliation bill. We will discuss the president's visit, the gridlock among his fellow Democrats, and President Biden's fall from grace as the most recent polling numbers put him at Trump-level lows.
This is the Volpe Report, a weekly news and political interview show examining the latest local, state, and national issues with Chuck Volpe. Insightful, informative, controversial, the area's premier political talk show, the Volpe Report.
Matt, welcome back to the Volpe Report.
Chuck, good to be with you.
And let me say, I would be remiss if I didn't point out your lovely wife, Marion, coming from a very politically and legally prominent family in Northeastern, really across the whole state, had an honor recently. And I guess it would be Marion's, would it be her grandmother?
Marion's grandmother, her paternal grandmother, her father's mother.
Right, was the first woman to really serve this area for, I guess, over decades, really, in the House of Representatives, became a leader in the House of Representatives, a pioneer. Not many women were in the legislature back in starting in the 40s, I believe, 1948, around that time. And so again, another something I know you're very proud of and your family should be. And she'll have a statue now in Courthouse Square in downtown Scranton for Lackawanna County, and well-deserved.
I'm so grateful to you for mentioning that, Chuck. It means so much to the Munley family, and they got so many of their values from Marion Langan Munley. You're right. Her husband died in 1947. She took over his seat as a state rep. She was reelected 9 times. Yeah. She never got a pass. There was always a big pitched battle about her seat. But her emphasis was on taking care of the people, doing the constituent service, helping people get the medical care that they needed, all kinds of things like that. And they are so honored, the family is, that she, on the Spruce Street side, now the Biden Street side of the courthouse in Lackawanna County, she's there among other titans of public service, Congressman McDade, Governor Scranton, and Governor Casey, it was very touching, and I speak for the whole Munley family when I say how grateful they are that they were accorded that honor.
Deserved. You are on call, literally. You will be escorting the President of the United States of America, Joe Biden, as he comes to the Scranton area in northeastern Pennsylvania this afternoon, and you are front and center as a point person, welcoming him and shepherding him through the area. So can you talk a little bit about your day ahead and the events and why the president's coming?
Sure. The main thing he's coming for is to tout the Build Back Better plan. We're trying to pass a broad spectrum of infrastructure improvements, certainly the roads and the bridges and the rail systems. I was grateful that he and Senator Schumer included robust funding for Amtrak, which will include rail service to northeastern Pennsylvania if we get it done, and they're doing the ridership studies already.
That'll be between our area and New York City?
Our area and New York City, and they're looking at 3 trains a day going each way. To me, it's not just about a pretty train ride through the countryside, Chuck. It's about jobs. It's about our economy. I mean, if people are unhappy around here, It's because our economic prospects aren't as good as they are in other parts of America. And there's no reason. When I first ran, I saw that and I said, there's no reason we can't be the best here in northeastern Pennsylvania. Well, look, when I was in school, I studied economic history of the United States. And one of the things that you learn very quickly is that centers of commerce spring up around transportation options. There's a reason Pittsburgh is a powerhouse. It's because of the confluence of the three rivers right there. Right. Well, studies have shown that where Amtrak puts in new lines, economic activity springs up. They did a line north of Boston that went up into southern Maine, about an 80-mile spur. All of a sudden, factories and office complexes and residential neighborhoods started springing up, and the property values went up, and the job prospects got better, so there were more jobs and better paying jobs. There's no reason, if our kids want to make something of themselves, that they have to move out of northeastern Pennsylvania. We can do it here, but we restore rail service to New York City from Scranton. It goes all the way down Lackawanna County through Monroe County, and we get that done, and Amtrak has assessed that it will give us more than $80 million a year in economic activity growth on our side of the Delaware River in Monroe and Lackawanna counties. So we will be gathering at the Trolley Museum down in the rail yard in Scranton this evening with President Biden. And you're right, he has a lot to talk about. Talk about the hard infrastructure, the roads, the bridges. Right. That's a very popular part of the thing. The other part is the Build Back Better plan. And one thing that I know you'd appreciate, Chuck, and a lot of people don't really understand about it, is that it's huge in helping employers. Now, even before the pandemic, one of my favorite things to do is to go around to companies and find out, what do you need? What do you need to hire more people and to grow? And the first thing you always hear from a manufacturing concern is, we need more trained up people to fill positions. We have open positions in our manufacturing facility. They're going begging because we can't find people to do them. And I do my best to hook them up to local trade schools and junior colleges, and we had some success there. But in the Build Back Better plan, there's a lot of money for workforce development, so that money can go to places like Johnson College or LCC, and do that, train people up to do those better paying manufacturing jobs. And that was before and after the pandemic. And the other thing you hear after the pandemic is restaurant and retail employers really complaining that they can't get people to come back to work. Even after they ended the extra unemployment compensation coming from the federal government, they're still not coming back. But if you had more available child care options like pre-K or more available child care generally, that would free up these people to get back to work. Right. There's a lot of that in the Build Back Better plan. So what I'm saying is employers ought to sit up and take notice. That Build Back Better plan, that answers a lot of their problems.
Well, I've talked about on this show on a number of occasions. If anybody told me a year or so ago that I would pull up to my favorite Dunkin' Donuts and there'd be a big poster in the window saying $500 cash signing bonus. I thought NFL football players were the only one that got signing bonuses just to become an employee in a coffee shop. I've seen Garrity's, who did yeoman's work during the pandemic, as you're aware. I've seen the CEO on billboards throughout the Northeast with the same thing.
Look, you and I never lived through it. We're the same age. We never lived through a time when we had to shut down the economy. Right. And we had to for a pandemic to save lives. We lost over 700,000 Americans. But it would have been a lot worse if extreme measures weren't taken. Well, you shut down an economy, you have to start it back up. And the problem is that this was an economy that was kind of fine-tuned already to be at maximum performance, getting things delivered, lickety-split. Americans kind of got a little fat and sassy about how, spoiled about how fast they could get things and for how cheap. And then when you shut down the economy, you have to start it back up. You're going to have, the slinky effect. You're going to have bottlenecks. You're going to have disruptions.
Right.
I mean, I had a manufacturer call me about a month ago, and he said, part of what I make, there's a component that comes from the Pacific Rim. And 2 years ago, to fill up a container, you fill up a container with product coming from the Pacific Rim across the Pacific to the United States. How much do you think it cost to ship that one container? $2,500. That was about the going price. Right now, between $10,000 and $12,000.
Wow.
Yeah.
And you know how trickle-down economics work. That gets passed along.
Gets passed
to
along,
consumers.
and it slows down the whole process. So as a result, people are really experiencing pain right now. But again, it's the stopping and the starting. And my hope is that after about another year, these things will start to smooth out.
When we come back, we're going to talk about two things. One, some of the earmarks he'll talk about that he's in position to deliver on for this area. And the elephant in the room, of course, is why the infrastructure bill and that we need desperately and that he's talking about is languishing in Congress. We'll be back after these messages.
Every week, Chuck Volpe shares his perspective on Pennsylvania issues in the news and on your mind. From new laws being introduced in Harrisburg and Washington to government spending and even local controversies, hear how they affect us in Northeast and Central Pennsylvania. Catch Volpe's views every Tuesday on the Fox 56 News, first at 10.
Welcome back. Again, I'm here with Democratic United States Congressman Matt Cartwright, who today will be doing a very important duty for this country, and that is acting as a guide to the President of the United States, Joe Biden, as he comes to the area. And Matt, at a time when the President has flat out got difficulties, his ratings have hit record lows, almost Trumpian level. There's been a number of controversial issues that we can debate whether they were handled well or not.
Well, sure, like Afghanistan, that was tough.
Yeah, of course.
And you mentioned before about trying to plan for war,
right?
Or plan anything around war. And, first what's the expression? Man plans and God laughs.
I never heard that one before. I'll attribute it to you.
Well, sure. So every war plan, you draw it up and then you hold your breath to see how it's going to go sideways. And that one obviously did. The extraction from Afghanistan was awful. It was awful to watch. For my own part, I can give you my own perspective because we were getting requests. We're very fortunate in northeastern Pennsylvania to be blessed with a lot of veterans who live here in northeastern Pennsylvania. And we got contacted in my office by no fewer than 3 Army colonels who served over there. And the thing about making colonel is that if you're in a country where they don't speak English and you're at that rank, you get an interpreter.
Wow, I didn't know that.
Sure, and if you remember, one of the big flaps was about getting our Afghan interpreters and allies out of there because they were going to be killed by the Taliban. And I got called by 3 Army colonels asking for help to get their interpreters, and we actually succeeded. We got 2 interpreters and 1 musician who played for American troops.
Wow,
out of Afghanistan. Wow. So that was gratifying on our end, but it's always going to be a sloppy thing, and I think that was certainly one of the things that contributed to the dip in the polls.
Sure, it did. The other thing, and this is a part that's a head scratcher for me as a Republican now, and that is that for a president and a party in need of something good to happen, and an infrastructure bill would be a salve that this country needs. He's up here, of course, today, and you're going to be accompanying him touting infrastructure and Build Back Better. And it's being, my understanding is the infrastructure bill has that rare thing in today's divisive politics. It has bipartisan support.
Right.
In fact, I had heard it had passed and was about to be signed, and then it got shanghaied. It got shanghaied by the Progressive Caucus in the Democratic Party in the House of Representatives, where you sit in the House, so you can shed a little light on that. And what they effectively did is they tied the very controversial $3.5 trillion reconciliation bill. They've tied that bill to the infrastructure bill with the understanding and the ultimatum. Either you pass both or we're withdrawing our support on the infrastructure bill. So talk a little bit about that and what prospects and hopes we have, because there's still kind of no end in sight on the reconciliation bill. There's been movement, but we're still at an impasse. And why is the infrastructure bill not getting passed?
Okay, well, first off, I have served almost 9 years in the U.S. House, and the whole time I've been there, I've been waiting for a robust roads and bridges infrastructure package to come through. You're right, it is bipartisan. You don't have to be a Democrat or a Republican to understand the need to take care of our roads and bridges. We have a portfolio of assets in this country that the greatest generation handed down to us, and who are we to let it go to waste?
Right.
And to crack up and drive over a bridge and wonder if you're the last one safely over it. It's crazy. We have a bridge connecting Pittston and West Pittston right now that has been shut down because it is structurally deficient. Right. It's unacceptable. And so the greatest disappointment to me in my 9 years down in Washington has been that they haven't been able to come together and do a major infrastructure bill. At this point we're right on the precipice of doing it. And as I said, the money includes Amtrak funding for the kinds of things we've been talking about.
Which seemed to be a no-brainer.
But yeah, the efforts, it has been decided that that will be linked with the Build Back Better plan. That's what you should call it instead of the 3 point. I mean, you're never going to sell anything by starting off with the price tag.
Right.
But I talk about it, we've already talked about it a lot. All of that workforce development and child care that will help employers, that's in there. And when you talk about $3.5 trillion, it was never 1 year $3.5 trillion. That's over 10 years. And if you average it out, that's averages to about a 5% increase in overall spending. So it's not really something to say the sky is falling.
Right.
It's also paid for. As opposed to the $7.8 trillion in additional debt that this country took on over the last 4 years. Right. And of course, an issue there is Mitch McConnell doesn't want to address the debt ceiling, which is ridiculous. It's like spending $7,800 on a credit card, and then when the bill comes saying, well, that wouldn't be prudent to pay that bill.
Sure.
That's crazy because it would crash the American economy and the world economy if America stopped paying its bills. Sure. That has been the most dependable promise during our lifetimes and our parents' lifetimes and their parents' lifetimes, that the United States of America pays its bills. Right. And the world economies depend on that. And if Mitch McConnell is still talking about defaulting on the American debt in December, let's keep our fingers crossed that that's an empty threat, because the stock market would crash that day. Right. If he did that. I don't want to see that happen.
Sure.
But the Build Back Better plan, it's going to take a haircut. There's no question, because
the latest numbers, Congressman, I'm hearing it's kind of down around $2 trillion now. At least that's a number. So it's already been pared from 3.5 to 2. But Joe Manchin, which will be a necessary vote, and Kirsten Sinema of Arizona, he has pretty much gone on the national circuit, meet the press, face the nation, and on the record said he won't consider anything above 1.5 trillion. So, but I guess I want to get back to the issue. The issue seems to be that I refer to it as what they've called themselves, the Progressive Caucus of the Democratic House, is saying we're not going to move on the infrastructure. What I have said to you off the air is that I don't understand a president and a party that could use a victory and his poll numbers could use the boost. you have bipartisan support. Is there any chance that that's still a drop dead? We will not move the infrastructure bill without moving the reconciliation or the Build Back Better bill?
Sure. Well, certainly it's easy to get caught up in the process. And when I'm up close and personal with it, I do down in Washington, but you don't want to lose sight of the big picture. And the big picture is these things are going to get done. You're right. The Build Back Better plan will take a haircut. I'm sorry about that because there are a lot of really solid investments that will move this nation forward in it. Sure. For example, Joe Manchin wants to take out subsidies for solar and wind. Because why? Because it hurts coal production, right. And he's from West Virginia. I'm sorry to see that. Right. Nevertheless, that's the soul of compromise, going sure. back and forth, and I predict that compromise will happen. And
that's encouraging.
And try not to waste time singling out this part of the caucus or that part of the caucus. You know, you have the progressives, you have the moderates. Right. They call themselves the Mod Squad. Right. And that kind of interaction that goes on all the time.
I remember, I think off camera, I reminded you in one of your first visits to the Volpe report. Maybe it was the end of your first term or the beginning of your second term, but at that point there were Republican majorities. Mm-hmm. You were in the minority party, and I remember you telling kind of funny stories about the Republicans who had the votes, couldn't get anything done because the Freedom Caucus right. Of the far right, yeah. kind of like mirroring the far left Progressive Caucus, had brought the party to its knees, the Republican Party, to its knees because they couldn't get anything done because they weren't far right enough. And so it's funny how, maybe it's not funny, but how the world keeps spinning and it goes around in a circle and everything seems to come back. So you sit here as a powerful appropriations chairman in the Democratic majority in the House, and you're now facing firsthand what your Republican counterparts faced years ago with their Freedom Caucus. But things eventually worked out, and we're hoping that happens again.
Chuck, I came in 2012, and I'm great friends with a lot of Republicans. And
I remember Trey Gowdy specifically was one of your good friends.
Good golfer.
Yeah.
Yeah. And you know, we would fight like cats and dogs on the Oversight Committee, and he was part of that Freedom Caucus. But my policy is to make friends with all of them. That's why during my 9 years in the Congress, I have introduced more Republican-supported bills than any other Democrat in the House. And it's why, as a member of the Pennsylvania Democratic delegation, I have passed more substantive bills than any other Democrat in the Pennsylvania delegation, including folks that have been there a lot longer than I have.
I remember, in fact, telling our audience in multiple times through the years that you were consistently among the highest ranked in terms of getting bipartisan legislation done.
Hey, look, I'm a Democrat and I make no apologies for it. But I also promised when I went down to Washington that I would work across the aisle because that's what people around here want to see. They want effective members of Congress. Right. And by the way, I think there's light at the end of the tunnel with all the food fighting going on down there. One of the little bits of glue that does tend to hold us together are member-directed spending projects. Rather than just ceding the spending authority to the executive branch and having agencies decide where money's going to go.
Earmarks.
Yeah, it used to be called earmarks. It's a little different now because money cannot go to private industry anymore. It all has to go to nonprofits or municipalities, government agencies. Sure. And since I got to be a chair, one of the 12 chairs of appropriations, it's a delightful job. I'm no longer just voting yes or no on somebody else's work. My subcommittee funds all of NASA. We actually
80 billion. Close to 80 billion is in here.
80 billion is the whole bill. 25 billion is NASA. I'm so thrilled. It gives me the power to help push work here and there. And there's a company in the back mountain that we got a contract to work with SpaceX. Wow. So we have space work being done in northeastern Pennsylvania now. I want to keep that going.
You have a couple other earmarks that you mentioned to me earlier that you want to bring here.
Sure. That's the idea, is that if members have member-directed spending, formerly known as earmarks, it brings them together because then they cooperate. I scratch your back, you scratch mine, and we're both able to bring money home to our districts for important projects. And that does help cut down on the partisan bickering down in Washington. And so, for example, Robert Adderholt, who is my Republican counterpart, he's the ranking member on Commerce, Justice, and Science, we get along very well. He has a lot of space interests in his district, right. And they are important companies that are doing very good work. So we support each other. It put me in a position, this is that we're kind of dipping our toe in the earmark world. It's all capped at 1% of federal spending now. But even so, the average member of Congress got about maybe $2 million in member-directed spending in this year's appropriations bills. Northeastern Pennsylvania got $19.6 million.
Wow.
And it went to every county in my district. Wonderful projects like beefing up the Wilkes-Barre Police Department so that they have shot spotter technology. Anti-gang money, $2 million of that went to the Lackawanna County DA's office.
Wow.
We have beefing up, we still have this opioid problem. I mean, it's not going away.
No doubt.
So we have opioid efforts in Wayne County and at the YMCA throughout northeastern Pennsylvania. We have a business incubator going into downtown Wilkes-Barre. We have an emergency service center going into Broadheadsville in Monroe County. We have combining the police and fire headquarters in Moosic, and we're doing that in other places too. So there's a lot of need in our area. And when people will say, well, earmarks, I mean, you're just wasting money. This is pork spending, right? Hey, I'm here to say, there's northeastern Pennsylvania, Lackawanna County, Luzerne County, Monroe, Wayne, and Pike. There's a reason we don't look as sparkly and shiny as other places. Have you been to Atlanta lately? I mean,
the Final Four a few years back.
It looks like the Emerald City compared to here, and places in Mississippi and Alabama. Money's going to those places that we're not getting. And the way to fix that is to have an effective member of Congress from our area making sure we get our fair share of federal tax dollars coming back to northeastern Pennsylvania.
Well, one of the things I have been educating our audience and this media market really from your second term on, your rise in power has been meteoric. Into leadership by your second, into your third term, House Appropriations by your third term, a show a couple years ago in the last term you were there, you were already in line to be a cardinal when you went into the majority, which you did, and then of course now our chairman of the House Appropriations, one of the 12 cardinals. Congressman, thank you so much for making time. As you're off to see the president and shepherd him around this area, and I wish you well in that visit, and thank you for making time.
Thanks for having me on.
Pleasure. Again, we're here today, I should say, as he is now going to leave us, with United States Congressman Matt Cartwright, who is playing an important role on bringing money back. If we can get some consensus in Washington and get those bills out, the infrastructure bill particularly is something very, very important for our area, as you've heard him explain why, and we hope that gets done. We'll be back next week.